If you're a gun person, let me ask you something. Do you really think the National Rifle Association is acting in your best interest? I mean, seriously. I mean, come on. Number here is 663-1270. Love to hear from you. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk1270. Name of the program is Bizman Weekly, talking about the issues affecting life here in the Peace Garden State and surrounding region. Here's the deal. Obviously, everybody's been talking about what happened in Charleston, South Carolina last week with the shooting. And every time, and yes, I have asked this question before. We've talked about this before, but it just never gets resolved. The question is, if you're really an advocate of gun rights, as I am, if you carry guns, if you own guns, if you work with guns, if you sell guns, if you use guns for hunting, if you have a gun at home for personal security, whatever the case may be, if you advocate the right to keep and bear arms, how can you be supportive of what the National Rifle Association is doing? I mean, with friends like them, who needs enemies? I was a member once of the NRA. And by the way, the number again, 663-1270. I was once a member of the NRA. I joined right after the shooting at Columbine High School for the simple reason that I was concerned. A lot of people were talking then about what had to be done about the gun problem. And I was very concerned then, as I am now to some extent, about what's going to happen to our gun rights in the future. I signed up for a year's membership. When the membership came up for renewal, I did not re-up. I just basically, they kept sending me reminders, so you've got to re-up for another year so we can do all those benefits and so on and so forth. I just tore up the envelopes and just didn't pay any attention anymore. Eventually, they stopped sending them to me, I guess. I mean, I moved away. Let's put it this way. They haven't sent them to my new address, so... apparently, they're not that persistent. But the thing is, two things about the NRA that left me cold. Number one, all they ever did was hit me up for donations. With all these horror stories about the terrible things that were going to happen if I didn't. This, by the way, was back in the late 90s, right before the 2000 election. You still had the waning years of the Clinton administration. And remember all the terrible things they said were going to happen when Clinton got in and Hillary and this, that, and the other. And, of course, it never happened. They said the same thing when Obama got in and this, that, and the other, and so on. Well, so the one thing was they kept hitting me up for donations. The other thing is when they say something totally inexcusable, as they did last week after the shooting in Charleston, when a board member for this organization came out and basically blamed the pastor, who was one of the people shot to death, blamed the pastor for his own death, in effect saying that when this man was a senator, if he hadn't opposed concealed carry, he would still be alive. I look at stuff like that and I just wince. Dude, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Are you going out of your way to make enemies? What is this about? The only thing I can figure is somehow they got the idea in their heads that the people they should pander to, and maybe there's something to this, I don't know, but I don't like it. The idea that the extreme, the lunatic fringe, if you will, are the people with the deepest pockets, are the ones who are going to make the big donations. Therefore, we have to pander to these people. Tell them what they want to hear so they'll send us more money. Maybe that's what they're thinking. I don't know. Personally, I think they could do just as well by not doing that, by being a bit more civil in their discourse. An NRA board member blamed the pastor, his name was Pinckney, Clemens Pinckney, who was one of the victims of this Dylan Roof, one of the shooting victims. This NRA board member blamed this pastor for his own death, claiming that his opposition to a bill that would have allowed individuals to carry concealed weapons in church is the reason the Roof was able to murder 9 people Wednesday night. Well, the truth is we just don't know. But beyond that, there's a question here of common decency. 9 people are dead. They were shot to death. They were blown away. And even before the bodies are cold, you've got people like this rushing right out to mutilate and convolute it in any way they can to fit their own agenda without any thought to the common decency factor. You know, we've got a lot of people out there in this day and age who like to lecture us about decency and morals, and quite a few of these people seem to have no sense of decency themselves. So I ask the NRA, and I say this as a person who supports the right to keep and bear arms, undisputedly. I ask the NRA board, did you guys bump your bleeping heads? Are you going to sit there and tell me with a straight face that you are really acting in the best interest of your members, pulling crap like this? Or is it all about just getting as much money in your hands as possible? Well, that obviously is a rhetorical question. I think we know how we can answer it, right? Your take is welcome. Number here is 663-1270. Jim Walsh on SuperTalk 1270 and SuperTalk1270.com. More conversation, your calls coming up.
When I hold you in my arms and I feel my finger on your trigger.
So you tell me if you're a gun person, if you believe in the right to bear arms, and I'm with you on that 100%. But what I'm not with you on is the National Rifle Association. I think they're a joke. I think they're playing you. They just want your money. They don't seem to be really interested in doing anything positive and productive about promoting that particular agenda. If anything, they seem to be going out of their way to make as many enemies and alienate as many people as possible. And I can only speculate as to why they're doing it. But you tell me, if you're a member of this organization, explain to me how antics like this, when they say what they said last week, this guy hadn't opposed the concealed carry, he'd be alive today. Explain to me how that works in your best interest. 663-1270, you get a lot more flies with honey than vinegar. And just insulting people who are dead and obviously saying things like this, really, who are you appealing to? It certainly doesn't appeal to me. I mean, there's a sense of common decency here that, a lot of these social conservative types really miss the boat on. Number 663-1270. While we're talking about that, where's that list? Somebody sent me a list of all the different ways that the social conservatives are. Oh, here it is. The ever-growing list of what social conservatives are blaming for the Charleston shootings. This is great. Of course, we mentioned the guns not allowed in church. There's some another Gun Owners of America. The Reverend. Oh, it's Clementa Pinckney. Okay. The Reverend Pinckney voting against concealed carry of guns in churches. Well, the truth is we don't know if it would have made a difference or not. Well, we may never know. Some of the other ones, our friend in Texas, former Governor Rick Perry, over medication, abortion. Okay, I don't want to get into the abortion thing, but, hostility against Christians. Here we go with the beleaguered Christians. Oh yeah, the poor Christians. Ever since Ever since Obama got in, the Christians have been under attack. Right. Hostility against Christians, hatred of religious liberty, socialist race wars. Rand Paul, who I like in a lot of ways, he made a very bizarre statement. He said, people not understanding where salvation comes from. Now, if he's saying what I think he's saying, I might be with him here. You know, people looking for, if he's trying to say people looking for the government to solve all their problems and you have to look inside your hearts and you have to change hearts, I could kind of go along with it, but it's just so, I wish he'd done a better job of, if that's his message, I wish he'd done a better job of kind of making it clear and understandable to people. Some of the others, I love these. Godlessness. Well, of course, the godless have to get blamed for this. The governor of Louisiana, you talk about a BS salesman with a mouthful of samples, Bobby Jindal, he's running for president too, right? He said the problem is not enough religion. Because, as we all know, religious nuts never hurt anybody, do they? Well, they send me lots of money. Somebody blaming the devil, Representative Mark Sanford, the devil. I love this when these superstitious people actually get elected to office. What the hell's that all about? Representative Steve King, not one of my favorite people, prescription drugs. Okay. WorldNet Daily, Larry Klayman, blaming, guess who, President Obama. And that brings me to this other clip here. Let me see if I can pull this up here. A woman named Sandy Rios from the American Family Association, one of these organizations. You know when they name themselves, when there's family in the title, you kind of know what you're getting in this case, right? You know what their agenda is going to be. You get a pretty good idea, right? Well, Sandy Rios said this, President Obama enjoyed the Charleston shooting because it will give him another chance to remove guns from the hands of the American. Now, are you skeptical? Let me roll the clip here. Let me roll the clip. You listen to it for yourself and tell me if that's not what she's saying here. Okay?
The black coach that was killed, one of the 6 women and 3 men killed, have spoken out, offering their forgiveness to Dylan Roof already. Men meeting in the streets praying. It's just, that's really my favorite part of this story. But then there are other people who seem to respond and fester and enjoy these problems and make the most of them. And I would include the President of the United States. This, of course, he took as an opportunity to lay out his passion against allowing American people to carry guns. Let's listen.
Okay, she's going to play a clip of a clip of a clip. You get the basic idea. Right there, I think you get the basic idea, you know. Hey, let's never lose sight of the people who are the real victims in the Charleston Church massacre. White conservative Christian male gun owners, Republican presidential candidates, and analysts from the Fox News network. These are the people for whom we need to come to the rescue. God help us all. 663-1270. And what confuses people, you know, they hear me say things like this, and they automatically, oh, you must be some kind of liberal. And actually, I'm not a liberal on some issues. On some issues, I'm so conservative, I make guys like Rush and Hannity look like a bunch of New Dealers. But on this particular issue, what I'm talking about here is addressing the issues and acting in a socially appropriate manner. Not PC so much, but just bringing a little bit of common decency into the mix. When you've got 9 people who are cut down in this kind of incident, this kind of tragedy, the thing you don't want to look like you're doing is making a big show out of it to fold, spindle, and mutilate the whole tragedy to fit your particular political agenda. Now, some people would argue that the president himself has done this. I give the president a little bit of leeway on this because he's the president. I mean, he's got to say something about it, all right? And what does he really have to gain? I mean, he's not going to get reelected again. I don't care what Alex Jones has to say. He's not going to, he's not going to barricade himself inside the White House and stay there for a forced third term. It just ain't going to happen. But some of these other people, I mean, at least try to use a little. If you're going to take something like this and try to fit it to your particular political agenda, at the very least, try to show a little finesse about it. Don't just come right out and say, well, if you people had listened to me, this would not have happened. We got to change the laws of this, that, and the other. I mean, that's how blatant some of these people are. And it's pretty stupid, and more to the point, it's just not the decent thing to do. All these people like to lecture us on decency. And then they come around and say stuff like this, because it fits their agenda. Oh, okay, well, we can throw decency out the window. Decency as in trying to have a little bit of empathy for what certain people are going through right now, the grief, the torment in losing their family members in such a meaningless manner. Now, I happen to believe that the gun issue, changing the gun laws, if it does make things safer, it would be only a little bit. Ultimately, I'll get to what I think about the big picture in a bit, but my point is this. Getting back to the essential question here, one of the worst offenders anytime something like this happens is the group, the National Rifle Association. I am a defender of gun rights. I am a defender of the right to keep and bear arms if you're a law-abiding citizen who is mentally of sound mind, so on and so forth. What I do not defend and what I do not admire is the tactics of a group like the NRA. It seems to me that what they're really interested in is appealing to the wingnuts, the lunatic fringe of their own constituency, so that they can get more money into their pockets. I really believe that these people couldn't care less about the best interest of regular citizens like you and me, who, to whatever extent we do, may actually be concerned about this constitutional right to bear arms. The NRA couldn't give a tinker's damn for you and your friends and family. I really believe that. The number here is 663-1270. And by the way, there was a commercial. I'm not going to name names here. And I'm not going to condemn the people who did this necessarily. I would just advise them that it's not in their best interest to do this. When you do a commercial on radio or TV or the internet for your gun shop, don't make a joke out of it with some guy running around acting like he's shooting at everything and playing soldier, because that just plays right into the hands of the gun grabbers. Please don't do that. It's not a good idea. Maybe you thought it was. Maybe your intention. I will assume the intentions were totally good here, but that kind of thing is not going to make you the right kind of friends. It is going to make you the wrong kind of enemies. In a situation like this, if you're a gun person and if you're a gun dealer, people are looking to you to see how you're going to react to this kind of thing. Because as the advocate of that position, they want to see what you have to say about it. I'm talking about the average people now, not the blowhards, not the talking heads. The average people on the street who may probably have trouble making up their minds about this. Because contrary to what you would think from any of the talking head networks, things are a little more nuanced than you gather from watching some of these shows. People try to think these issues through. They try to come up with their own solutions, or they at least try to figure out which side is closer to being right. And if you're making an ass of yourself, it's not going to help your cause. You've already got the hardcore true believers on your side. The people you got to try to get are the people who are undecided. It's just like an election, Hillary or whoever's going to be running, whoever's going to Jeb or whoever's going to run on the Republican side. My guess would be Hillary and Jeb. They've got their hardcore following. They don't really have to worry about them. The people they're going to ultimately have to worry about are the people who are sitting on the fence. If you're Jeb Bush, you're not going to. Once we get into the main campaign, once we get past the actual convention and the nominations and everything, if you're Jeb or you're Hillary, you're not going to want to insult your potential voters by marginalizing them or making them look like a bunch of screaming AHs. You know what I mean? But that is exactly what we seem to be getting from groups like the National Rifle Association and all these so-called religious morality groups who want to make it look like it's so simple that there are these evil people who are trying to hurt you, and they're horrible people and they're stupid people. No, wait a minute. They're not horrible people. They're stupid people. A lot of them are us. So you tell me how the NRA is acting in your best interest as a gun owner. Tell me. Number here is 663-1270. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270. More conversation coming up.
This is an Answer Plot update with Winfield agronomist Kyle Oakey.
Right now, 72.
Get the app called Radio Pup for your iPhone and take us everywhere you go. Bismarck and Mandan's own Super Talk 1270.
In 1814, we took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we caught the bloody British in a town in New Orleans. We fired our guns and the British kept a-coming. There wasn't as many as there was a while ago. We fired once more and they began to run it on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. We looked down a river and we see the British come, and there must have been 100 of them beating on the drum.
Well,
they
now.
stepped so high and they made the bugles ring. We stood beside our cotton bales, didn't say a thing. We fired our guns and the British kept a-coming. There wasn't as many as there was a while ago.
All right, Super Talk 1270, supertalk1270.com. My name is Jim Walsh, and I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. Talk a little bit about this situation with the $10 bill. A lot of people, there's a campaign going on right now to put a different face on the $10 bill. A lot of people, they want to honor America's women in history, and that's perfectly understandable. There are a lot of great women who are worthy of that honor, going all the way back to the Founding Fathers. There were a few women among them, Founding Mothers, I guess, if you will, like... That sounds so obscene, doesn't it? Here in the Founding Mothers. Yeah. No, I'm thinking of people like Abigail Adams, the wife of John Adams, who was a very strong influence on Mr. Adams and his ideas about liberty and building a new country. She should certainly be honored on some piece of currency. And, of course, you have people like Sakakawea, who was on some currency not too long ago, and who else? Susan B. Anthony, and there are others. A lot of people suggested Eleanor Roosevelt, for example. There is kind of a sidebar to this, though, that I really do like and agree with here. And I want you to tell me if you don't go along with this here. Among others, the former chairman of the Fed, Mr. Bernanke, has suggested that we not dump Alexander Hamilton off the 10. What we should do, if we're going to honor a woman, we're going to put a woman on our currency, put the woman on the $20 bill and get rid of Andy Jackson. For the simple reason that Hamilton was a founding father. He was there at the beginning. He was literally the architect of the American capitalist economic system. He was the guy. The reason we have the economic system we have today, like it or not, for better or for worse, the good and the bad, it is what it is, largely due to the work of one man, Alexander Hamilton. I read a great quote somewhere that Hamilton is probably the most important person in the history of this country who was never elected president. And by the way, there was a great biography of Hamilton, came out about 10 years ago that I had a chance to read, written by a man named Chernow, Ron Chernow. A great book, great book. An extraordinary individual, deeply flawed, of course. But Hamilton, let's keep Hamilton and let's get rid of Jackson from the $20 bill. I mean, Hamilton was a founding father. He kind of belongs in the pantheon. Jackson has more of a, shall we say, a mixed legacy. And this is very relevant here in this part of the country for the obvious reason that we have so many Native Americans living here. And to a lot of people, even today, a lot of people in the Indian or Native American community, a guy like Jackson is just evil. A lot of older Indians still to this day refuse. I've heard this. I'm told there is some truth to it, that a lot of the older folks on the reservations will still, if they can, they refuse to use $20 bills because Jackson's face is on it. A little history lesson here. Jackson, when he was president, he was the architect of something that we now call the Trail of Tears, the forced migration of Cherokee Indians from the eastern Piedmont to the Midwest, roughly where we now have Texas and Oklahoma. And basically, he got the government to get these people up and come on, get up. You gotta go west. You're gonna move you west. Manifest destiny and all that. So they got them and they marched them west. And I forget how many people died along the way. And a lot of people call it America's Holocaust. Well, it's certainly one of them. I would include the slavery thing as also a Holocaust in its own way. But yeah, this forced migration, this relocation, as we euphemistically describe it, and what the Indians call to this day the Trail of Tears. One man was responsible for that, and that was the president at the time, Andrew Jackson. Jackson was not really a good guy in a lot of ways. And I, for one, have no problem with the idea of getting his mug the hell off the $20 bill, which, by the way, happens to be one of my favorite denominations. Anything under a 20 is okay, but you get to the 20, you're starting to get into a territory I really like. And let's put Mrs. Roosevelt on there, or let's put Mrs. Adams on there, or let's put, I don't know, whoever would be Nellie Bly, the great investigative reporter. Or who else would be? There's some conservative women too, I'm sure. Who would be a prominent? Who would be a prominent conservative woman? I'm sure I could think of one. What about Libby Dole? But for the first one, maybe later down the line, people like Elizabeth Dole. But for the beginning, I think you need to look at people like Eleanor Roosevelt and some of the people who were around at the beginning of the country. My vote would be for Abigail Adams, the wife of John Adams, our first vice president, our second president. John Adams, by the way, was a terrible president. He was, among other things, the first really sucky president. And he only made it to one term, and he got bumped out by Thomas Jefferson. His once friend and rival, and then they were friends again right before they died. They exchanged some very famous correspondence. But the thing is, we got to get Jackson off there. Jackson was not a cool dude by any stretch of the imagination. So, yeah, I'm with Bernanke on this, 100%. Dump Jackson, not Hamilton, on the U.S. currency. Oh, Harriet Tubman, there's another one. Rosa Parks. Again, I think for the first one, you want somebody from right at the beginning of the country, which is why Mrs. Adams will get my vote for the very first one. Very first woman to get her own denomination. And then you get into people like Eleanor Roosevelt and so on and so forth. Maybe some of our more prominent first ladies. Well, that is my essential take on that. I got no problem with the idea of a woman on the currency. I've got no problem with the idea of people like Eleanor Roosevelt on the currency. What I do have a problem is taking Hamilton off the currency. He was just too important. Let's get rid of Jackson. Jackson was he was an AH, one of the great AHs of history. All right. And that's my take of it, not necessarily that of the staff or management of this here radio station. All right. SuperTalk1270 number here is 663-1270. To recap from earlier, we're talking about in the wake of the shooting in Charleston last week. Of course, a lot of people have been scrambling rather furiously to find ways to fit this to their own agenda, and if you think that's pretty damn distasteful, I'm with you 100%. But one of the groups that always comes out of the woodwork in situations like this and always manages to say something totally offensive and inappropriate is the National Rifle Association. And I say this even as I say that I am a defender of the right to bear arms. I take second place to nobody in my defense of gun rights for this country. But having said that, I don't think the NRA does a very good job of acting in the best interest of regular Joes like me who just want to make sure that we will continue to have reasonable access to firearms. I don't think they act in an appropriate way at all when they're basically openly insulting the pastor of this church, who is one of the ones who was cut down, by basically saying, as if they're taunting the dead here, well, you know, if he hadn't been against the concealed carry, he'd probably be alive today. What the hell kind of thing is that to say about somebody who was just cut down by bullets? What do you think this guy's family thinks when they hear something like this? And aside from the question of common decency, of which there is none in this case, is this really the way to make friends and influence people? No. On top of everything else, it's pretty stupid. It's a pretty dumb way to promote your agenda if promoting your agenda is really what you're about. If what you're about is just trying to get as much money as possible from the people with the deepest pockets, who we can all assume are the wingnuts, the lunatic fringe people, the people who will go along with crap like that, yeah, they'll give you a lot of money. If you're mainly interested in lining your own pockets and you don't really care about the long-term ramifications, then yeah, I guess it does make sense. So what does that say about a group like the NRA and about people like you and me who may defend the right to bear arms, and yet you continue to join groups like the NRA and give them your hard-earned dough, when basically all they will do is do everything in their power to make enemies while they appeal to the nut jobs? And what else? Well, like I say, when I was a member of the NRA for exactly 1 year, I joined after Columbine because of my concerns about gun rights. I upped for 1 year. All they ever did basically was send me press releases saying stupid crap like I just described. And what else did they do? Oh, yeah, and that, and hit me up for donations. That's the only two things. And mostly it was the latter. I'd say 90% of all the correspondence I ever got from the National Rifle Association was asking me for a donation for this situation or that situation, so we can, and of course they give you their scary rhetoric. And again, I am concerned about the right to carry firearms by legitimate, law-abiding citizens, I should say. I am very concerned about it. No, I don't think the current president is any worse than any of the recent presidents in that regard. And no, I don't think he's going to try to take all of our guns away. But there are people who would. There are certainly people out there who would, and I'm concerned about them. And I'm concerned about our gun rights. And I'm more concerned about the fact that you've got people who supposedly protect our gun rights and speak in our favor, but are actually doing nothing but lining their own pockets. And I'm talking, of course, about groups like the National Rifle Association. So tell me, if you're a member of this group, explain to me how they're acting in your best interest. 663-1270. Jim Walsh here on Super Talk 1270 with more conversation. Your calls coming up.
Right now, it's 73.
Sean Hannity, weekdays at 2, only on Super Talk 1270.
Is this what I think it is? It better not be.
If the South would have won, we'd have had it made.
It is.
I'd probably run for president of the southern states.
Oh, shut up. Just shut up. Hank Williams Jr., you are not half the talent your father was. You're just a stupid redneck blowhard. You're a moron. And that's the kind of thing we don't need in this situation. All right. And I'm speaking as someone here with genuine Southern creds. Half my family, my whole mother's side of the family came from Eastern Tennessee by way of Florida. Or was it the other way around? Anyway. And as far as I'm concerned, there is only one flag I salute. That's the flag of the U.S. of good old A, Old Glory. I don't need no rebel flag. You get that thing out of here. That was the flag of traitors. That was the flag of treason and slavery. I don't want any part of it. You know, you want to wear a T-shirt with the flag on it, fine, go for it, you know. I mean, you're doing me a favor by basically telling me, you know, helping me know who to avoid, namely you. But as far as flying it in front of somebody's state house, no. But there are a couple of angles on this I want to get into here. The number here is 663-1270. The recent fracas, the flap, if you will, get it? Flap, flag, yes. The flap over the Confederate battle flags has taken some interesting turns. And I find it interesting, for example, that based on what I know about history, among the people who would have favored my side on this, among the people who would have said, you know, take down the Confederate flag, would be the Confederate patron saint, Robert E. Lee, the general who led the Confederate Army in the field. And yet after the war, he did as much as anybody could to help bring the country back together. Truly a man for all seasons. He was a guy who really transcended. You know, a lot of those Confederate generals. You have guys like who's the guy who Forrest, right? The one who founded the Klan after the war. You know, Nathan Bedford Forrest. You know, he can go jump up something sideways as far as I'm concerned. But guys like Lee. Lee was a pretty cool dude. He was a good man. After the war, he did what he could to help bring the country back together. And he made a genuine difference in that area. And we'll get to that in just a moment here. Anyway, there's a flap going on right now involving a park in Baltimore County, Maryland. Park is named after Robert E. Lee. And when I tell you what I think about this, you know, a lot of people get confused because, you know, you have to understand there are nuances. There are different ways of looking at different questions. Now, I, for one, am fully in favor of taking down the rebel flag in front of anybody's state house. I've made that very clear. Whereas I have no problem in taking something like a city park and using it to honor a man like Robert E. Lee, who, like I said, yes, he was a Confederate general. Yes, he led a treasonous rebellion against this country. But after the war, he did do a lot to help the country get its act together again. In particular, one decision he made may have made all the difference. And I don't want to sound like Paul Harvey here. I'm doing the rest of the story, but it's one of those kinds of stories. Right as the war was ending, I mean, they were literally down to the last couple of days before he finally decided to go to Grant, U.S. Grant, and negotiate for terms of the surrender. And one of his sidemen, one of Lee's sidemen says, "General, why don't we just tell the boys to just go guerrilla, just scatter into the bushes and just carry on the war, you know, shooting from, every which way." And the story goes, Lee kind of nodded. He said, "We're not going to do that." He said, "If we do that, the country will never get back together again. I mean, it'll be just the whole country will be one big war zone, and nothing will ever be resolved." He said, "You guys, if you want to go bushwhacking, that's up to you, but I will have no part of it. I'm going to go to General Grant and negotiate for terms so we can all get our country back together and we can all get on with our lives." Lee actually said that. He actually did that. And in that capacity, the head of the Confederate Army arguably did more than anybody to help reunite the country after the war. Because think of what would have happened if he had signed off on the idea, the guerrilla fighting. Vietnam in America, basically, is what you would have had. The country probably never would have gotten back together in one piece. And it was Robert E. Lee, that man for all seasons that he was, who was responsible for it. He did other things, too. I mean, when he swore allegiance after the war to the United States of America, in the process, he encouraged a lot of his following to do so as well. So, yeah, I have no problem honoring a guy like Lee. He was a major figure. He was first in war, but he was also first in peace. Second, arguably, to Mr. Washington, our original leader, of whom Robert E. Lee was an indirect descendant. His wife was, I think, Washington's. How did it work? He married the great daughter or a step granddaughter, something like that. His wife was related to Martha Washington's family. That's how it worked. Okay, I don't remember the exact lineage. But the point was that Robert E. Lee was very strongly connected in the minds of people, if by marriage, with the legacy of George Washington. And he knew it, and he knew that he had to act in the best interest of the country after it was all over. Once he saw the handwriting on the wall, he said, the best thing we can do is to reunify the country and kind of get things back on track, and so we can basically all get on with our lives. That's what he said that day, shortly before he went to grant for the surrender at Appomattox. And for that, I rate Robert E. Lee very highly, and I have no problem honoring a man like that by naming an occasional city park after him or whatever. You know, there's that school in Virginia that he actually ran after the war. That's now named partially in his honor, Washington Lee University. Great story there. He used to go out and watch the troops. It was like a military college at the time. I suppose it still is. But he would watch the students out on their maneuvers, and they said he would march along, but he would always make a point of staying out of step with the students who were marching. You know, just little stories like that. Just an amazing, extraordinary individual. So, yes, I celebrate the taking down of the flag of the Confederacy and everything it stands for and stood for, including slavery. But at the same time, you know, if you honor a man, an honorable man like Robert E. Lee, I'm certainly okay with that. Now a couple of follow-up stories here as time allows. We're running up on the hour. I've talked before on this show about the whole question of vaping. Let me see if I can find basically, as you can imagine, I've got a benevolent black hole for a filing system. And a new study has come out about vaping, which basically confirms what I and others on my side of the issue have suspected very strongly, is that vaping is not something that, well, what they say, the anti-smokers, what they like to say, the breathe ND types, they say that vaping is bad because it leads non-smokers to start smoking. And basically what we have found out is that is simply not true. By an overwhelming margin, almost 100% of the vapors are people who are also smokers. In other words, people who are non-smokers do not take up smoking by going to vaping, which kind of blows that whole argument against vaping out of the water. The argument being is that it's a gateway for people to start smoking. Well, it's not. It never has been. By the way, I really can't stand those Breathe ND commercials. I mean, they get so ridiculously heavy-handed. Yeah, there are people. I mean, yeah, smoking is not a good thing. My wife smokes. I'm trying to get her to quit. I'm working with her on that. It's not easy, but I hope she will quit. But you guys who run this Breathe ND thing, you're not doing yourself any favors. You get real smug and you tell us about how great it is, what you've done to stop smoking in public places. Basically, what you've done is interfere with the basic rights of businesses and people who patronize these businesses to decide for themselves whether whether they're going to allow smoking in their clubs, or B, whether the people in the clubs are going to support them and smoke themselves. So please, spare me the smugness, okay? You're not wonderful people for forcing these clubs to stop smoking. Oh, isn't it great we've done this and we've stopped these people from smoking? And you realize, all of this is going to fall on deaf ears because they have basically one argument to respond to everything. They have basically, no matter what I say, no matter how much sense I throw at this subject, they're just going to say this. They're going to say, well, smoking is icky. That's the nutshell of the Breathe ND argument.
Smoking is icky. And we're wonderful people because we're stopping people from smoking because smoking is icky. And you shouldn't have the right to smoke even if you want to. Even if it's a free country, we should have the freedom to stop you from smoking.
That's basically what they're saying. And people go along with it, By the way, have you heard the story? I talked about this on the other station the other day. Scientists helping smokers quit by giving them doses of a drug found in magic mushrooms. Gee, maybe it's not too late to take up smoking. I don't know. Man, I get me some of that there action, Fire out, man. All right, your comments welcome. SuperTalk1270.com. Jim Walsh here for SuperTalk1270. Love to hear from you. Be sure and comment on, let us know what you think. In the meantime, hang in there. Have a good day. Thanks for listening.
ABC News, SuperTalk 1270. Accurate news, stimulating talk. This is KLXX AM, Mandan, Bismarck.